Hello, we are going to talk about multilateralism and its difficulties since it was established, and we are going to refer to it by talking from the different points of view of some important political actors. First of all, multilateralism consists of the cooperation between three or more countries to achieve a common goal. This cooperation occurs in the framework of international organizations funded for this objective, or directly in negotiations among countries, international or even non-governmental organizations.
Now, on the second hand, before talking about the specific political actors or regions and their perspectives regarding the principal topic, there is some criticism about multilateralism that could apply in the world in general. Some nationalist threats of certain territories, as well as the demand of one-sidedness in political action, confront the different objectives of the international organizations, such as the United Nations, putting at risk their mission. On the side of emerging economies, the criticism has always been based on a supposed control of the rich countries on those less rich. This control helped only some developed economies to take advantage and direct above developing economies. This criticism has been present throughout the history of multilateralism. So first, we are going to talk with Europe and their perspective.
We Europeans are by nature multilateralism, and we have always considered multilateralism as a tool to temper power politics. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, we have promoted a form of multilateralism in our image and likeness, searching binding agreements to unify the wills of all the other countries in the world under the idea of a liberal democracy. However, as these countries align geopolitically with China, Russia, and other potencies that try to impose a conflictive vision of the international order, reducing the space for consensuated multilateralism, which we as power countries have been used to. In this new context, we defend our interests following a strategy of double way regarding international cooperation. In EU and in a certain circle of countries, we recognize the limits imposed by some political agendas, often divergent. At the same time, they strive for closer cooperation with smaller groups of like-minded partners that share common principles about openness, responsibility, and individual rights, offering the opportunity of implementing an efficient multilateralism in times of global gaps, provided that both ways complement and do not hinder each other. There's no doubt of the commitment from the European Union with an efficient transatlantic association capable of seeking joint solutions, promoting the shared interests and strengthening the international order based on rules. But it is evident that this relationship becomes difficult to sustain if there are other places where someone thinks that the EU was created to harm them, which I personally think is completely wrong interpretation and makes decisions that affect us without taking care of the European concerns and interests. And I do believe that Europe could play an important role in the leadership of multilateralism in world politics. Absolutely yes. We have to do it because of the growing strategic rivalry between United States and China, where general interdependence is getting more and more conflictive, and there's a more general trend towards competition between countries and systems, particularly with some of our neighbors like Russia and Turkey, who seem to want to return to a logic of empires. We are asked to do it, and for that, unity is more necessary than ever in our labor of promoting world competition. And EU takes into account the competition in this aspect with China and other liberal, the EU at last has to find a way to coordinate with China on matters like climate and global debt, while turning to cooperation with its liberal partners on technology and human rights. We EU acknowledge that it's easier to protect our citizens' interests by acting forcefully to mold and sustain the guidelines of multilateralism itself is a space for competitiveness within which in the EU must use its influence and links to promote the type of international order that suits us. Through our participation both in related groups and in other more open ones.
Seems like multilateralism is the best thing ever to solve the problems in the world. Now, let's listen to what the United States thinks about it.
We, as well as the European Union, think multilateralism is necessary for the international order of the world. It helps cooperation, and it brings a lot of movement to the economic system. The Bretton Woods system of monetary management established the rules for commercial and financial relations among our nation and some others, such as Canada, Western European countries, Australia, and Japan, after the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement. After this, a lot of important organizations and institutions were formed, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund the most important ones. However, as it was mentioned earlier, we think that there's a lot of risk with some extremist nationalists who put their agendas above the world's interests. That's why it is necessary for us to intervene in one way or another when a country deviates from the right path.
I see. The United States has a very important place on interventionism and these international relationships. Now, let's listen to more perspectives. China, can you tell us about how multilateralism is going on there?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I would like to mention that multilateralism works in all parties' benefit. I like to call this the win-win formula, where obviously, as a nation, I must have some benefit in international relations, where I maintain my regional stability and economic growth. All this arises from the Cultural Revolution in search of expanding and strengthening our country in terms of international relations and economy, as has been the case of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the dialogue of the Six for Korea, the Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank. As I mentioned, everything is in the search of good relationships. However, internally we prefer to handle public and social situations without the intervention of external entities, because culturally they wouldn't make the most correct decisions. We also want to emphasize that multilateralism is fundamental at the international level, and more currently with the COVID situation. Xi Jinping, before the arrival of Biden, have to assume the protagonism of the World Economic Forum, in which is mentioned that for the resolution of the global conflict, multilateralism is necessary, because claim that a divided world is not strong enough to face even the most common conflicts that happen. It proposes that the cooperation is necessary for the resolution of global problems that have developed during the pandemic. Due to the economic recovery of the situation, it suggests that epidemiological control should be maintained and throughout macroeconomic incentives and restore socioeconomic development.
So, for China, multilateralism isn't important within the country, but it is important to survive internationally. However, as I know, some things are different for the southern countries. Latin America, can you tell us a little bit about this topic?
Sure. At first, multilateralism seemed to be a great way to integrate Latin American countries into the international relationships, because this was supposed to be a way that helped our economic growth and the construction of a better space for our societies. However, we also felt that it was an imposed system because we had not participated in its construction. It is also important to take into account that those who really have a voice and vote within the international association are those who can more contribute economically. So this leads us to countries like the USA that end up taking an important place of making and taking all the big decisions at the international system. And on the other hand, Latin American countries will never be part of it because we are the ones who will actually be benefiting from these monetary helps and projects. After a while, it began to be seen that the development agreed in this organization did not work because, as we already know, Latin America is permeated with corruption. So all the economic help was always being stalled by state entities. Another problem that we can see is that now we have a great debt with the international system, and therefore the state sovereignty is lost because these institutions force our Latin American countries to comply with some agreements to finalize the debt payment. For example, one of these agreements was the liberalization of the economy, which implies countries with a few resources like us and international economies compete within the market, which is ridiculous because free trade will always win the economic competition. To solve this problem, various Latin American jurists and diplomats developed a multilateralism within Latin America, focused on the defense of non-intervention, the prohibition of the use of force, and the non-aggression. This is kind of regional cohesion, originated by three major statements. First, it has an ideological order because there is an historical and political identity within Latin America regions. The second one, with an economic order, which looks for the cooperation within the region and competitiveness on the international markets. And finally, the third one, which is an international insertion, and this one is in favor of forming international ties in order to be participants on making important decisions, so in this way we can try to benefit our territories. For example, one of the regional cohesion is the creation of the UNASUR and CELAC, which was founded in 2010. However, all this process of the construction of the regional system shows a huge problem, which is the lack of innovation and initiative. This affects policies of Latin America scope. There is also ideological rivals and divisions between countries. That lead us to weakness and political paralysis. In general, all the Latin American systems tend to fail in their purpose. Finally, it can be concluded that for Latin American countries, the intervention of multilateralism has not been entirely good, because Latin America has always been known because of its cultural diversity, and this system cannot cover all the particularity, and it also can be said that it was harmful and increased the foreign debt, the poverty, and the regional decay.
I agree. In respect to my region, I have a clear example: the Economic Cooperation Organization. Their purpose is financial support to the countries that need it, but they don't have sufficient resources to carry out their economic plans. Therefore, they don't fulfill the objectives of the organization. In the same way, like the president of Turkey mentioned, today we see one more time the word is bigger than 5. Making reference to the representation that exists of the word in the United Nations Security Council, where there are only 5 constant participants. On the other hand, I also believe that some Western governments, on behalf of international support, look for a regime change through military interventions. This can be seen especially in the case of Iraq in 2003 and to a lesser extent in Libya in 2011. Finally, this type of actions generate a distrust in these international organizations that, through a helpful posture, seek to take advantage of other countries.
So, in the case of Middle East countries, it seems that multilateralism has created more problems than solutions. And what about Africa?
Countries have recognized the importance of multilateralism when it comes to promoting development, prosperity, and peace. That's the reason why, beyond supporting the global efforts like United Nations, the Not-Aligned Movement, and G77, Africa made the Organization of Africa Unity in 1963. Since 1960 until 1990, the multilateral initiatives brought us a special support in the moments when we fled of the colonialism and the apartheid was ending. But some financial restrictions block the capacity of these institutions to fulfill their goals. Because of this, Africa still depends deeply multilateral global institutions. Most of the resolutions from the Security Council of the United Nations are focused on Africa, where the agencies of the UN, such as United Nations Refugee Agency, International Organization for Migration, United Nations Children Fund, and the World Food Programme, also do a big part of their job. Even if these efforts are valuable, they sustain an unbalanced dynamic and perception of Africa acting more as beneficiary of the global multilateralism than an active participant in it, much less a leader. But no one understands the African context better than Africans, and given their commitment with the multilateral strategies, it seems clear that we should be performing a more important role in the leadership of international initiatives inside and outside the continent.
Finally, we would like to thank everyone to share their perspectives of this important topic in the world, and see you next time.